Hello, and welcome back to this tutorial series, a retrospective review of RuneScape's historic tutorials. Mod Poerkie was with us very briefly, but he's having some trouble with his internet, so it's going to be just myself and Mod Jack again.
Hi.
Hi, Mod Jack. Yeah, so it's really good for us to be back. It's been just over a month. So this will be
I'm
our
hyped to talk
second
about the
monthly
Troll
episode.
Warzone. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. A 2-hour tutorial tour talking about the remainder of the Troll Warzone. Mod Jack is back with us, apparently a glutton for punishment, to endure torturous flashbacks of his many months developing Troll Warzone and enlighten us with his design expertise.
At least
This
it wasn't
episode's
on tape.
deck.
It's fine.
Yeah, that was a horrible one. This episode's deck is nearly 200 slides and almost 10,000 words, a new record by a considerable margin. But we'll take a 5-minute break on the hour each hour, and we'll see how many hours it takes us to complete the enormous Troll Warzone.
The trolls are coming!
Is there some audio playing?
There was. Stop
Okay.
now.
Okay, right. Okay, yes, so moving on to the disclaimer. As always, this stream will discuss a specific tutorial from RuneScape's past in exquisite detail. We're not showing off a new tutorial or hyping any future content. RuneScape is active. If that's the only reason you're here, you should only have to watch for a few minutes, so please don't feel compelled to stay for the whole 2 hours if this topic doesn't interest you. But if you stick around, that's awesome too. I am unable to see the chat, but my lovely assistant Mod Jack is back to keep an eye on your tutorial questions, and Mod Poerkie will also hopefully find some in the chat. We'll occasionally stop for some relevant Jack and Stu and A along the way. In last month's episode, we discussed the tumultuous development of Troll Warzone, the 6th version of RuneScape's tutorial. We summarized the wealth of content that released with the Troll Warzone at the end of January 2012. We also viewed the first opening cutscene of the Troll Warzone and walked through the original primer chapter in the Burthorpe Troll Cave. You, Ozan, and Corporal Keemans defeated a troll general, collapsed the troll's tunnel with cannon fire, and adopted an adorable baby troll. When the Evolution of Combat was released later that year, both of these scenes were replaced with a new introduction to the Troll Warzone, but more about that shortly. In the beginning, Troll Warzone was conceived as the opening members game experience, a project to ease first-time members into their subscription. The opening members game experience was not originally intended to be the new player experience. The OMGE was originally designed to be supplementary. New free-to-play accounts would start with the Lumbridge introductory tasks, while the Troll Warzone was intended for new members. The OMGE's target audience was a player already familiar with the basic mechanics from free-to-play, who needs a gentle introduction to members' content. It was therefore located in Burthorpe and Tavley, the first zone past the infamous Members Gate west of Falador, at the edge of the free-to-play area. The OMGE project, when originally conceived, was focused on making the Troll Warzone area enticing, modernized, and convenient for new members. For example, the OMGE included a new members quest, Let Them Eat Pie, a darkly twisted parody of Cook's Assistant intended to subvert a familiar free-to-play quest. The new quest was a feature of the members' starting zone, but you weren't required to complete it. If you preferred to fight trolls rather than complete quests, then you were free to focus on the content that suited you. The OMGE featured convenient skilling hubs for new members to train their skills, a polished zone to explore and engage in set-piece acts of heroism. These included an introduction to the 3 combat styles, featuring the new signature heroes. You could also get recommendations to level-appropriate content to maximize the value of your membership. Freedom of choice was at the heart of the OMGE. It provided various things to do with your membership within easy reach, but how you chose to play in the sandbox was up to you. About 3 months into development, on the verge of completion of the OMGE, the project's priorities completely changed. Jagex was now going to give new free-to-play accounts a week of free membership, so they would effectively start RuneScape as a member. That way they could experience firsthand the value that membership provided. When their membership expired, they'd be more accustomed to membership benefits and know what they were missing if they lapsed into free-to-play. Therefore, the opening members game experience needed to become the new player experience. It wouldn't make sense for players to start in Lumbridge and waste their free membership trial exploring the heart of the free-to-play area. So, Burthorpe and Tavley needed to be reimagined as the tutorial for everyone, new players, free-to-play, and new members. The scope of the project radically transformed and hugely expanded. Tutorialization of core gameplay and every skill, free-to-play and members, was stuffed into Burthorpe and Tavley. It was a very business and production-led project. A lot of very detailed, very sweeping feedback trickled down from above, requiring frequent changes to the Troll Warzone. New directives shifted the aims of the project, such as a focus on cinematic, action-first, exciting gameplay to entice a new, modern audience. A cohesive, linear narrative also became a requirement, as well as aggressive guidance to minimize churn, and a requirement that every member skill must be introduced on the critical path. The Troll Warzone's acts of heroism, skill introductions, and 3 of its quests, designed for non-linear exploration and discovery, were chained together into an exhaustive series of chapters. The tutorial therefore felt mandatory, and took about 3 hours to complete, shifting back from Lumbridge's exploratory tasks to an on-rails structure similar to Learn the Ropes, albeit in the open world. Freedom of choice in skill progression and content engagement, the agency to explore and find your own objective, are central to RuneScape's ethos. And yet, a starting zone designed to maximize those selling points was converted into a railroaded, linear experience. Out of fear that new players wouldn't know what to do and wouldn't know the value of their membership, the sandbox became a roller coaster. The OMGE was developed for over a year, and to keep up with production change requests and the size of the project, 4 content developers were dedicated to maintaining the Troll Warzone until its release in January 2012. After its release, Troll Warzone received several nips and tucks over the course of 2012 and 2013. One of the largest and most notable post-release changes was a new introduction to Troll Warzone in November 2012 to update the tutorial with the evolution of combat. Before we talk about the new opening cutscene though, any questions? And I think that ModJack might be having some issue with his audio. We had some trouble earlier. No, still can't hear you, Jack. Oh dear. Okay. Well, while we try to get Tim's audio back, let's move on to the next slide. Yeah. So we have to move to the next slide, and then we'll have the video after that. Yeah. Okay. So in November 2012, the primer that released with Troll Warzone in January was completely replaced with a new opening chapter and a new cinematic intro. Major Nigel Carter was also replaced by Major Mary Ranker, who you can see standing atop these battlements. The action shifted from the interior of an abandoned mine to an exterior action scene, the Troll Invasion Canyon, but soaked with rain, grim, gloomy, and foreboding, as you hold the line against invading trolls. While we're still waiting for ModJack to get his sound back, let's start by watching the new intro cutscene.
The trolls are coming. They think us weak. They mean to burn our homes and farmland. But we are not afraid to fight them. We will crush their assault and drive them all the way back to Death Plateau. This wall has never... Look out!
Smash the Here they come!
Quality. By the way, credit to Wise Wahizatul for recording the video of that cutscene, as well as the remainder of the primer footage that we see here. As with the previous primer, the full top-level interface is available, and you begin in an instance environment, but the primer does fix your view to focus on these 3 soldiers on the next slide, crushed upon under masonry. This postpones the issue of RuneScape's unique camera controls until a quieter stage in the tutorial. The continue button on your first instruction is also illuminated to make it more apparent what your first action should be. As with the previous primer, the objective panel slides to the left edge of the screen, and the chapter tracker appears to persistently display your objective. 3 red arrows flash over the 3 weapons clutched in the dead soldier's hands. You must choose to loot either a sword, bow, or staff from the fallen. You're immediately told that your weapon is a members item. Members items have gold names, have unique abilities, and are more powerful than free-to-play items. I see we're immediately setting the tone of a tutorial intended to upsell membership. Right, I think we're going to need to take a bit of a break for a while until we can get Modjack back. That way we can get some questions from you guys. So we'll be back shortly. Hello, and we are back.
Hello.
Apologies for the technical difficulties there. Can you guys hear Modjack?
Can you hear me okay now? I'm going to assume they can.
Yeah.
Someone, very important things came up in the chat. Someone thought that we were recording. Someone said that we weren't recording this live. And honestly, I probably would have had my microphone working if this was pre-recorded. And someone said I was doing something else, which is true. I was trying to fix my microphone. That's mostly what came in the chat. Yeah. I was going to talk about Mary Rancor, actually. That was intentionally like there are almost no important female. Oh, sorry, at the time there were almost no important female characters in RuneScape. There was like Zanuck and there was Ariane, and so and technically, so we made her female on purpose. And then I had an interesting discussion with the art team where I was trying to explain to them that I didn't want her to be sexualized.
Right.
And this was quite like, obviously the politics of computer games have changed quite a lot in the last like 7-8 years. But this was quite early on in that period, and it's actually surprisingly difficult to explain what I meant by this character isn't there to be sexualized. She's just a proper, serious, gruff military commander who happens to be a woman, not, a hot female character. And because Ariane came out like, and Anyway, she turned out to be pretty badass. And the speech that she gives is intentionally, it's like the flip of what the troll says. Because in the previous version of the intro, the troll's talking about strength. And so she's saying something similar. I think she's talking about strength through camaraderie and that kind of stuff. Like, we're strong, we'll resist them. But of course, you can't, once that one went into game, the old one had been removed. So they form an artistic pair, but only one of them was in game at a time.
Oh, right. So would you ideally like them to both be active so that people could get both sides of the story?
I guess so, yeah. But it's just kind of like, this is how writers amuse themselves, right? When they have to write tutorial introductions.
I see.
Well, because you do the same thing.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I'm going back to that cutscene also for a second. Were there any particular inspirations for the choice of environments? To me, the tone was, with it being all like dark and gloomy and rainy, kind of reminiscent of the battle for Minas Tirith in Lord of the Rings: Two Towers. Were you had any particular inspirations?
That wasn't conscious on my part. I think it was Mod Lino that made the cutscene. The broad direction. I think it came from me. It's possible it didn't. Was just essentially show the town, like show what's going on, so that you know what you're fighting for, basically. So in that sense, it's very similar to the point of Minas Tirith. There's lots of lingering shots on the poor people who are under threat and that kind of thing. So very similar stylistically. I don't think it was intentionally drawing on that, but obviously it was hugely influential. So I suspect everyone was being subconsciously influenced by it.
Yeah, well, it seems like a expedient use of assets there, because you basically have the troll invasion environment there already, and you have the trolls coming down from that side, and the human civilized area. But
Yeah, exactly.
I'd imagine it being more of an open area, feel less claustrophobic than the interiors that we've used for most tutorials thus far, rather than starting like Cellar and Lumbridge.
Yeah, that was the big change. That didn't come from me. That came from Art. That they said, because the previous one was in a cave, and they said we want, because I pitched an improved cave version, and feedback I got from leadership and Art was we want it to be outside because the lighting is kind of uninteresting inside, and like we can do a better job of presenting a more interesting situation and scene if we put it outside. So then we looked around and obviously have it, the troll invasion minigame already existed, and so we just sort of built on that basically.
Right. So I pretty much steamrolled it over you through that whole of the summary at the beginning. But were there any things that I said there that were incorrect or that you'd like to elaborate on?
No, I thought that was a pretty good summary. Yeah, I was nodding along with it. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah, it was a tricky project.
Yeah. Well, we'll go into more detail about what happens in each individual chapters later.
You mentioned like talking about like membership, promotion of membership, and some people in the chat were expressing some cynicism over that, and I can understand where they're coming from. But it actually is a bit of a problem for us. Like I've been involved in several. I think you have as well. We've been involved in several projects where like actually it's quite hard. Membership in RuneScape is quite important. You get quite a lot for membership, but it's quite hard to communicate that. It's difficult to communicate what you're getting. It's difficult to communicate the value of membership in a sort of intuitive way that's easily grasped by a new player, because obviously the game was originally not designed to work in that way. The idea was that membership was something that you got long after you exhausted the free game, and that hasn't been the way RuneScape works for quite a while. And so a lot of our emphasis has been on essentially just trying to communicate what membership gives and explain the value of membership. So I don't think of it as sort of like it's marketing, but in quite a gentle way. It's just sort of showing you what the product is, basically. Like here's what's on offer, and trying to do that in a way that's exactly.
In the case of this membership trial, being able to actually experience that for yourself and knowing the full value of membership,
rather than just endless pop-up windows, which are saying, oh, here's what membership could get you. It's got 150 quests or whatever, 150 more quests. Instead, just sort of showing you, and you can tell the difference.
Yeah. Okay. Should we move on?
Yeah. No, carry on. I'll keep an eye on the chat.
Okay. Next slide, please. So pressing continue resets your camera, so you're able to get a view of this glorious battlefield. Imperial Guard battle trolls in the rain. It's quite epic. You're in a confined area, yet you're out in the open air, so it doesn't feel claustrophobic, and it makes for a more interesting and better lit scenery than a dark cave or cellar. As we'll see shortly, the primer has several cutscenes which reset your camera to an optimal angle, and your objective is always one click away. Therefore, camera and movement tutorialization can be postponed until after an action-oriented teaser scene. You receive 17 coins for completing your first chapter task. Ozan helpfully reassures you that whichever weapon of the three you chose was a good choice. Your second objective slides to the left and the tracker re-enables. We see your avatar in the center of the screen. Taking a trick from learning the ropes, your chosen weapon is automatically equipped to keep you in the action instead of shifting focus to inventory management. It looks like we're now using a red arrow to suggest a troll for you to attack. We also see there's been some notable additions to RuneScape's interface in the last few months. The Evolution of Combat has released, so you have an action bar, with your first basic ability illuminated to encourage manual activation. There's also a new Extras button on the ribbon. Should you hesitate, you'll receive this helpful message to help you focus on your objective in the chaos of battle. Have any questions come up?
I've been noting stuff down as it comes. Someone asked why did you focus on Burthorpe and Trolls? And that was just Burthorpe was chosen before I joined on the project, but I think it was an area that was sort of just outside the free-to-play area. Oh, hi, Poerkie.
Oh,
it was just outside the free-to-play area. So ironically, it ended up being like it's now a free-to-play area, right? For a variety of reasons. But the reason it was chosen was because it was sort of one of the lowest level, most accessible members areas. Because it was supposed to demonstrate the members game, and trolls were used because trolls were the existing threat in Burthorpe. Hi, Poerkie. Do you want to introduce, or shall we just carry on?
No, I'm just saying hi. I'm not gonna lie. I heard a loud cheer from downstairs as well, but my parents' cheer also appearing on the live stream. So no, thanks for Modsphere for sorting this all out, and then thank you for covering while I wasn't here yet, and I was sorting out my
no
tech
problem.
issues.
I'm glad you're back with us. Yeah, you're nice and smooth now, so well done.
Exactly. I'll be the assistant noting the questions. You two do your thing, and we'll get cracking.
Okay, great. Any other questions you want to answer before we move on, Jack?
I was going to comment that, I mean, it's probably, you're going to probably go over it, but just this, you can see here like the gradually expanding freedom to interact, and in particular, like there's a battle going on, but in order to proceed, you just have to click on the troll that has a red arrow on it. But you can actually wander around and explore and do other things as well. So it's got that. It was something I brought up in the last one about, the ideal tutorial is one that leaves you free to make the correct interaction, basically.
Concentric circle design.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay,
also,
so,
some people are complaining that we're not attractive enough. So sorry about that.
Oh yeah.
I'll get
Myself
myself a
and
wig.
my parents apologise for that. So what can you do?
makes me a little bit sad, but never mind. It's just what we get.
Yeah, we'll just have to make do with our natural charisma.
I think we'll manage with our charisma and with our storytelling, guys. More than.
Okay, next slide then. Oh, sorry, we're on the right slide. My apologies. So this is a snapshot of a dark time, the dawn of the evolution of combat. The improvements that would redeem the new combat system are yet to come. So in this frozen moment of horror, we have no momentum, no revolution, and no lesser abilities to diversify the new player experience. Back then, you needed to manually hammer that one basic ability to build adrenaline and inflict anything more than auto-attack damage. There was a nice big adrenaline bar though, which does feel quite satisfying to fill and discharge. As you inflict the killing blow upon your opponent, the screen fades to black, and another cinematic cutscene ensues. The troll general we witnessed in the introduction stomps into the scene, framed in a bravely selected undercrotch shot. Morningstar, showering spittle in his fury, commands a pair of his minions to engage you in mortal combat. Ozan notches an arrow and prepares for battle, while you do whatever it is you're doing with that face. Angry, determined, constipated, answers on a postcard.
I love the lighting under his eyes there.
Yeah. A pair of troll brutes thunder toward you as the cutscene fades to black. Defeating a single troll earns you enough experience to gain a level in your chosen combat skill. Congrats! Though I feel the cutscene may create a bit of a disconnect from that action. You might have already forgotten about the combat by that stage. For completing your second introductory task, you also receive 4 gold coins. As the level up floaters excitedly inform you of the new abilities that leveling up has earned you, we see that earning a level has unlocked your first threshold ability, which has automatically been added to your action bar. This primer doesn't go into the specifics of skills and experience, but by leveling up and seeing you earn abilities, it conveys the core concept that leveling up unlocks new abilities. So you should kill more things, so you unlock more stuff. The core loop. We also see that there are in fact 3 trolls marked for you to defeat, 1 of each combat style. I guess the intention was to show that your chosen weapon is more effective against one corner of the combat triangle, but it gets a bit lost with everything else going on in the scene. Wahi loves his examines, so I also couldn't resist adding an examine he displayed while studiously exploring the area. As Modjak noted earlier, you could wander around here and examine things, not necessarily forced to engage with that core critical path action immediately. It's great to see darkly humorous examines included even in this grim and gritty tutorial. Ozan provides colourful commentary and range support as you whittle down the trolls with your 2 abilities. This gives you plenty of time to focus on the adrenaline relationship between basics and thresholds. Having dispatched Morningstar's 3 stooges, the general lumbers into view in a cutscene. Morningstar's clutching a struggling soldier in his mighty fist, which he hurls at you. The soldier strikes 2 soldiers in the foreground, which scatter like bowling pins. falling broken and lifeless at your feet. The camera pans up to you, appalled by this demonstration of the troll's vile disregard for human life. You are not amused. In fact, you seem to be in considerable pain. Somebody needs to turn that frown upside down. Ozan turns to you and courageously reassures you that he can handle this opponent without assistance. Brave Ozan strides forwards, heroically confident in his abilities. Brave Ozan is gravely mistaken. You react to Ozan's death with horror, or possibly by having a seizure. Morningstar leers down at you, rubbing the spittle from his jaw. You manfully, or womanfully, hold the troll's gaze, adopt a combat stance, and destroy him with your unibrow of fury.
I think this whole section was, I think it was Mod Lino working with the artists, whose mod names I can't remember, I'm afraid. But the artists on the team, I think they all worked together to make this, and they came up with these humorous moments and the very cutscene-led introduction.
Yeah, it's really good. There's visual comedy in there, and it's quite exciting.
Yeah. I feel like it's a lot stronger than the previous version. Like it's grander, it's more interesting, it's more narratively involved.
Yeah.
And there was a comment I wanted to make there, which I think, and again I may be misremembering this, but I'm pretty sure we moved the threshold and the ultimate to level 2 and 3. I don't think they were at level 2 and 3 before we made this, and we moved them all down, and that was actually a little bit controversial with the combat designers because there weren't that many abilities to unlock at the time, and they unlocked kind of a reasonable spacing through the levels, and dragging them all down to level 2 and 3 actually meant there was a lot less to unlock throughout the rest of the skill. But it's the sort of thing, like, you can see the compromise that's sort of necessary there with the tutorial, that if you're going to tutor how thresholds work, and if you're going to tutor the basic combat mechanics of the game, you kind of need that.
Yeah, either that or we have some kind of context-sensitive tutorial far later in the combat system, when you finish the tutorial area, and do it that way. But then the player could be in the middle of any kind of combat. It could wind up having some kind of a snowball effect of triggering during a boss's cutscene and break something else, so they can have its drawbacks too. So yeah, I think you made the right decision there.
Someone just asked, are these descriptions, I assume that by which they mean your script, is this coming from Mod Stu or is it from the original designers? So this is stuff that you've written up. But it seems very well researched.
Thank you. Well, it's basically a concession to the fact that I'm doing specific slides of this cutscene rather than just having to show every stage of the cutscene. So I was trying to add a bit of humor and a bit of grandeur as I go along, so hopefully try and make it a bit more entertaining for you. But no, this wasn't based off anybody's script they've written or anything. This is just my reaction to the
because you've studied all the previous tutorials in some depth, right? Because you've been working on tutorials for quite a while, and so you're kind of an expert on RuneScape tutorials through history.
Yeah, it's a bit of a nerdy obsession of mine. Yeah, I wouldn't go as far as being an expert, but
as someone who did work on this project, Stu's knowledge of this project appears to be slightly better than mine, is what I would say, because he's saying things that are making me go, oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah, I'd forgotten that. So yeah, Stu is, you can trust you, is my opinion.
Yeah, like I mean, one of the person was also asking, like, what's the reason we are doing this? Why are we doing these live streams as well? So we are doing this because partially we think it's very entertaining to talk about our previous live streams, and at the same time point things out about what is important if we were to design a new tutorial. And you kindly offered to do this when we asked, like, we'd like to have some live streaming content as well. Don't know if there's anything you wanted to add on that, Stu.
Yeah, to me, I found that you certainly are. I found this a very interesting part of RuneScape's history, because we've made about 8 tutorials over the course of the game's lifespan, and to me, I find it interesting that they've had different goals behind why they've been done. Sometimes we repeat the mistakes of previous ones, or we go in very different directions. We try different things. We do some that are more free-form, some that are more linear, some trying in interior areas, some that are more open world. Moving around which mechanics we're introducing. And to me, I find that it's useful to look back at that and see what worked and what didn't, and to take that forward into the future.
Plus, it's really just fun nostalgia, right?
Yeah. I mean, because we're also getting to see like snapshots of what the game was like at certain points in time.
Everything you're talking about was at least someone's first introduction to RuneScape.
Yeah, absolutely.
Are we using this as a Stu and A point as well, Stu? Because I've got a couple of questions, or are we inching in on a Stu and A point?
Sure.
Cool.
Let's take
Alright.
some more questions if you have.
I've got a couple. First of all, I just want to say that I've absolutely missed doing these tutorials with you. Your descriptions and funny jokes that you write in these are absolutely brilliant. So please keep doing that. Yes, I did get a new cut. Thank you. Someone noticed. That's a very old one. Now back to the actual questions. This one's probably more so for you, Jack. When we released Troll Warzone, was that the intention to release like future stories or quests continuing the story that we started with this tutorial?
I mean, it was supposed to move on to Death Plateau and the other troll quests. We weren't planning to extend the troll storyline beyond that. Sorry, there's a child absolutely screaming downstairs. I think she must have bashed her foot or something. I think my wife's got it. Sorry, I have to keep an ear out. The aspiration was much more involving the signature heroes. The idea was that this would introduce the signature heroes at very low level, and then they would level with you, and there'd be mid-level and high-level content with the signature heroes, which obviously ended up not happening. And then people started killing them and turning them into zombies and stuff.
All right.
As we'll find as we progress on to later chapters, though, then a lot of work was done on the quests in the Troll Warzone area to give them more of a cohesive narrative and tie them back to the troll story. So it all felt like part of the same narrative.
And then there was also a question from Inspector. Was there a reason why Troll Warzone was also focused on kind of combat in relation to EOC instead of skilling? Was there a specific reason? Was that just a design choice at that time, or?
I mean, Troll Warzone as a whole wasn't focused on combat. You think about the whole tutorial; it gives you an introduction to each skill, and which is crazy, but it goes on all of them. So actually, like 95% of the content isn't combat, but the intro is combat. Like the very first 5 minutes, 15 minutes is focused on combat.
Is there a reason that we decided that to be the case then?
I think it's. I'm not sure how I feel about it, but I think there's a general feeling, and I don't totally disagree with it, that combat is the easiest thing to introduce in a straightforward, exciting way. Right? There's a monster, you kill it. That's a basic sets your expectations. This is a fantasy game where you're someone who carries a sword. Obviously, RuneScape allows you to be a skiller, but our content and especially our narrative content is still largely focused around the idea that you are an adventurer who fights monsters. That is an important part of our game. You could have a completely different narrative focus, where you're introduced to the idea that a castle needs building, so we need you to go chop the wood and bring us some wood and assemble a barricade with it or something. And I think that would be a harder sell. It would reinforce the uniqueness of RuneScape. Because there's not many MMOs that would choose to introduce themselves in that way. But I think for someone who's sort of casually browsing around looking for games, I think that would be a tougher sell for that player. So I think the emphasis on combat, at least within the first few minutes, I think makes sense to me. But then very quickly, you go off and do start mining, making swords for people and that sort of thing, which I assume Stu will take us through at some point.
Yeah, we'll get there eventually. Yeah, I guess the production goal there is you want to try and hook the player in those first 5 minutes. There's various other competing products out there. You want to try to get them to stay with this one, try to present forth the thing that is most exciting, that might keep them playing for longer after those first 5 minutes. And I guess we've got to consider from that, well, what is the heart of this product? Is combat the best thing for that? Is skilling the best thing for that? Skilling has kind of more of a longer tail to it. Your individual actions might not be as exciting, but you're looking towards that progression and the leveling up that's going to come later on. So, it's a matter, I guess, whether you're going for the immediate sense of excitement or the long-term investment in progression.
The chat saying my mic is cutting out, so I'll try enunciating a bit more clearly and see if that helps.
You sound very clear to me.
Jack.
Were there any more questions there, Poerkie?
Well, whether RuneScape is enabled, then yes, it is enabled. So get cracking.
Okay, shall we move on?
Mm-hmm.
So, advancing to this stage once again earns you a level in your chosen combat skill. This unlocks your first ultimate ability. You also earn another 4 coins for completing your 3rd introductory tasks. With your companion out of the picture, the training wheels are off, and you need to apply what you've learned to defeat Morningstar. Several Imperial Guard attempt to battle the Troll General, but only you have use of abilities. Should you hesitate, as in the earlier scene, you'll be gently reminded how to attack the enemy. The boss has a few mechanics of his own. A knockback attack that also affects the guards, and he can throw rocks at you. At about the halfway mark, if you haven't already done so, you're encouraged to conserve adrenaline and use the new ultimate ability you've unlocked. Like his death in the previous primer, Morningstar falls to his knees and then crashes face first into the ground, only this time to reveal you standing behind his dead body in a cinematically satisfying way. Major Ranker strides onto the battlefield, remarking the Imperial Guard could use a few more like you. She turns in surprise as Ozan quite literally crawls out from under a rock, having inexplicably survived death by masonry. The camera pans down to a baby troll peering out from behind the body of Morningstar. Alarmed, the baby troll crawls under his father's forearm. He peers up in dismay at the lifeless corpse of his kin. The baby troll presses affectionately against the cheek of the stiffening corpse. Drool splashes out from Morningstar's gaping mouth, but his dead father is otherwise motionless. The baby troll hangs his head in dismay and begins to cry. The sobbing catches your attention. The baby troll, understandably afraid of you murderous humans, scurries away. Any questions about that cutscene or anything you'd like to comment on there, Jack?
I was gonna comment on there's a slightly forcedness. If I remember, am I remembering this wrong? But I think you can't kill him without using an ultimate. I think his hit points won't go below like 10% or something until you use an ultimate on him. I think that's how it worked. And that obviously that's not what ultimates do. So it's a slightly awkward compromise of tutorial design where it's actually teaching you ultimates slightly wrong because ultimates aren't finishers, right? That's not how they work. That's not what they're for. But otherwise, you can just auto-attack him to death and maybe just never figure out how to actually do combat. So there's an awkward tension there of like trying to teach the combat mechanics by not quite like it. You know, it doesn't quite teach you the combat mechanics accurately, but it does at least make you understand that you have to press the ultimate.
Yeah.
So
I mean, that's a tricky scenario in and of itself, because combat's kind of one of the worst times to be teaching the player something because there's already so much going on screen, and like, there's the risk of their own death. There's, dare I say, it's a cognitive load aspect of the players already got their focus on surviving this battle, and being distracted by being taught about aspects of the interface may not be the ideal time to do it. But you're in the middle of combat. This is how combat works, so. You don't really want to do it in situ. It's a tricky balance.
You can see the same design principle there, right? Where you're literally in a boss fight, but you're not allowed to proceed with the boss fight until you've demonstrated that you can do it. But at the same time, we don't want to kill the player, which is why his attacks like knock you back.
Mm-hmm.
They don't, if I remember correctly, they either don't damage you or they barely damage you. So the idea there is that the fight feels impactful. Something's happening. You can't kill him if you're being knocked away from him because you're not in melee range. Although there's a separate point there about this fight had to be designed to work with all 3 weapon styles. So it had to have this principle where the boss's attacks prevent you from killing him. So you're forced to do something because the worst outcome, I think, from the point of view of this being the EOC tutorial, effectively EOC being brand new and this being the tutorial for it, we don't want the player just clicking and auto-attacking and killing the boss without even ever realizing what was happening. That's absolutely something we had to avoid. So all of his attacks, the reason he throws rocks is because, I think they block line of sight. So he throws a rock at you, which knocks you back. So you're now behind the rock. So you have to walk around the rock in order to click on him. And it's very
Right.
trivial to do. Like if you're an experienced combat player or just an experienced RPG player of any sort, you'll do that instinctively. You won't even notice. But if you've never really played this kind of content before, if you don't really understand what's going on, then you're forced to engage with the controls and the mechanics in order to proceed with the fight without it killing you. So it was quite carefully designed in that regard to teach you the basics of combat in a safe environment that was nevertheless felt sort of cinematic and exciting. That was the idea.
Yeah, there's clearly a lot of thought that goes into this behind the scenes, and a lot of iteration that you don't always appreciate within those few seconds it happens.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the thing. It's supposed to be invisible, right? You're supposed to just experience it and come out the other side going, okay, I have to click on things to attack them. And then you know that, and it seems so natural and intuitive that you don't even notice you were taught it. That's the idea, anyway.
Right, gotcha. Any other questions before we move on?
Someone asked, was Troll Warzone the reason that member skills went to 5? I think so. I may not.
As I understand it, yeah, basically, after the members' trial ended and we needed to make Burthorpe and Taverley a members' area and the quests a free-to-play area and make the quests in their free-to-play content, because it was intended to teach members skills, so that it was still fulfilling its purpose, increased the member skills up to level 5.
Because it sucked otherwise, because you just went around and you did the hunter tutorial and you didn't get any XP, which just kind of felt a bit rubbish. So yeah.
Otherwise, you just encounter paywalls everywhere of saying no, you need to be.
Yeah, exactly.
You need to have membership. Even engage with this tutor, even talk to him about his skill. In this way, at least you can experience some of the skill, learn about its core loop.
Yeah.
Okay.
Another question from Sir Theodore Castle as well. Would we ever consider reusing some of these asset areas or cutscene in an eventual continuation of the Burthorpe story?
I wouldn't have thought we'd reuse them.
I mean, we have already used elements of them. I mean, there's going to be a scene later on, for example, where you're fighting gelatinous abominations with Ariane that we basically lifted as the climax for Turiel's Burthorpe Paths, because all the assets already existed. There was fully voice chat, and it fulfilled our needs of your first Slayer task. So basically, it's a resource that we made use of in places. Personally, I think I'd like to make more use of it. There's some scenes coming up later on, some of the acts of heroism that I'm really very fond of, and I think could be brought back as more like little mini quests or individual activities. I can't make any guarantees there, but yeah, personally, I think I'd like to make more use of this, because all this stuff exists, so why not make use of it? Only trouble, of course, is that think assets will show their age over time. This was 8 years ago.
Mm-hmm. It would be difficult to, we would not make new assets purposely look older to blend in with old content. So if we do it, we would want to upgrade everything. I think that's one of the things to take into consideration. So would you
reuse
really
save time over doing it from fresh? I don't think.
Yeah.
That is also you're probably right about that as well, Muljack.
Which isn't to say that we shouldn't revisit the plot line and the storyline, but I wouldn't have thought the existing cutscenes and assets would really help us in that regard.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Other question.
On the other hand, check out that guy's face.
Yeah.
I mean, the expressions on their faces are pretty good. I'll give you that. Did both of you give your baby troll a name? And if so, what's it called?
Ooh.
Oh, it was such a long time ago. Because I started playing at the time of Troll Warzone.
I named baby trolls.
Was it Brett?
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
I named a lot of baby trolls because I basically spent a year playtesting this content, so I had a lot of baby trolls.
Oh yeah, you must be so sick about that stage.
And then I hung when it launched. I hung around in live with a baby troll that was named something ridiculous. I can't remember what it was. It wasn't a pie hat. It was something else. But my actual baby troll on my own account isn't called anything special. It's called Rabbit Sam. Oh, I think it's Rabbit Sandwich. My actual baby troll, because I love the rabbit sandwiches here, and every time I'm ever talking to Mod Mark, I bring up rabbit sandwiches.
All right, fair.
Yeah, I think I just fed whatever I had in my backpack at the time.
Yeah, that makes sense. And there was a loose comment about Twitch Prime, but keep your eyes peeled because there will be something about that very soon. So have that as a bit of a teaser. That's what I had.
Hey,
Big Bones is a good baby troll name. I like that.
Nice.
Oh yeah, doesn't he have a special thing where you feed him his own dad's bones? That was in the old version, wasn't it? If you feed him the
I
Morningstar
believe they're
bones,
still there. Yeah.
and he gets called something different, doesn't he? Get called like my dad's bones or something like that. Like it's a different.
something like that.
I think the name changes. There's one unique interaction. I think. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So on that note, you receive 16 coins for defeating Morningstar. Blood money, if you ask me. There's a subtle mood shift here. After the cutscene, the rain has stopped and the ambience is warmer. The tension has eased and we can catch our breath, focusing on more specific mechanics. So this tutorial has taken an interesting new approach. It starts with an action-packed cinematic teaser, emphasizing combat. Only in the falling action after that climax do we start to tutorialize the camera and movement controls that are usually introduced first. And camera rotations managed in a nicely interactive way here that we haven't seen so far in this series. I think I'm a slide back. Yeah, that's it. Thank you. The baby troll scampers between the rocks surrounding you and is marked with a flashing red arrow. The Imperial Guard chase after the baby troll, lunging for him and failing to catch him without your assistance. You're pinned in place and are asked how to rotate your camera to keep the baby troll in view. You need to click the baby troll to point him out to the guards so that they can catch him. This does several things very well. You learn by doing. The sequence continues until you've grasped the mechanic in your own time, and it gives the player a sense of empowerment from ordering the guards around. It's also amusing to watch the guards throw themselves bodily at the baby troll, and its clear delight at outrunning its pursuers. The whole sequence is cute and wholesome. Going from grim warfare to sorrowful mourning to a spot of physical comedy is also demonstrating the roller coaster range of tone and emotion that is RuneScape. After successfully pointing at the baby troll twice, he clambers up into the barrel of a nearby cannon to hide from his pursuers, which has inexplicably appeared in the scene, but I won't question it. The camera zooms in on the cannon, and you earn 16 coins for completing your previous objective. You now
I'm glad
get to
the
choose.
coin totals are a bit saner in this version of the tutorial.
Yeah, I think that there must have been some scaling based on your level or something to the amount of coins you got. Because in the ones that we showed last time, I think the people were like max players, so they got showered with money.
Yeah, that makes sense. Sorry, Karen.
Yeah, so the camera zooms in on the cannon. You now get to choose the fate of the baby troll. You can either rescue him from the barrel or light the fuse and fire the cannon. If you hesitate, you can see the leaf on the baby troll's forehead quiver at the lip of the cannon, which is a nice visual cue to make it apparent the baby troll is still in the cannon. Good touch. Would you define this as a moral choice, Jack? I mean, what's the design intent of giving the player a choice?
Yes, I suppose so. This was a specific request of Mod Mark's.
Okay.
He felt like he wanted something. He was worried that there was a certain type of player. There's a certain type of player for who the baby troll would be wonderful. They would be really excited by that, and he was worried that there were other types of players who would find the baby troll quite off-putting and find the tone of it quite off-putting. So he essentially wanted to give them essentially content for them, if that makes sense. Like I've experienced something lovely, so I'm going to be nasty to it, basically. So and then if that's not if you don't want to be nasty, then you're like, well, why would I fire it? That doesn't make any sense. I'm going to save it. And you could argue that the moral choice element there is reinforced for the nice player, because the nice player, if you just give them the baby troll, you haven't had an opportunity to express yourself. But if you're given the baby troll, if you can choose to be horrible to the baby troll and you don't, you've expressed something about yourself. Like you've told the game that you're nice. You haven't just been nice in your own head,
Right.
So I would say
through your actions.
Yeah.
I'm curious now. Would you save or fire the baby troll?
Me personally,
I would say, save.
Yeah.
Oh no, he's into the stratosphere immediately.
Yeah, see, I'm with you, Stu. He is instantly gone. I'm like, if a game gives me a choice like this, straight in there, he's gone.
Yeah, full-on renegade.
Oh, you're too nice, Jack. What's the reason you saved the baby troll?
Because why would you just fire a baby out of a cannon? What? It's just really weird.
That's why I'm not allowed to have children.
So there's this thing, like like my reason for doing it because I've never done it before, and I'm granted the opportunity to do so. So I've done this now.
Games are all about
this
like,
off the list.
enabling fantasies that can't happen in real life. So like firing babies.
Well,
out
kind of, isn't it? It's a huge driver apparently. So yeah, like I'll fire that cannon with a baby troll anytime.
Okay, moving on. So it is a difficult decision.
Sorry, I did note something down there about the camera control. One of the things that's really important to me in tutorial development is that the tutorial shouldn't feel laborious for someone who knows what they're doing. So in the sense that you follow the baby troll, like if you know how to use the camera already, then you just follow the baby troll. You don't get told like, okay, and now you need to do this, follow my instructions. A lot of tutorials are very sort of, I am going to show you what to do and then you copy me. And there was a question related to that. Someone said, do you think it's good that players should be allowed to skip tutorials? And I would say no, skipping tutorials is bad because the players that are most likely to skip the tutorial are the players that most need it. The tutorial should be fun. That's how you deal with that problem. Don't allow it to be skipped. Instead, make it a piece of entertaining content in its own right that you want to play. Don't make it an annoying like training simulation mission or like you're in a hollow deck and holographic opponents attack you in order to allow you to shoot them. Don't that's still don't do that. Have a troll invasion and integrate the tutorial of the mechanics into the narrative situation, and then it doesn't need to be skippable because you wouldn't skip the story, right?
Right, so I'm thinking, since we're on the hour of 6 o'clock, more or less, why don't we leave this on a cliffhanger, take a 5-minute break, and then when we return, we'll decide whether they shoot the cannon or not. So we'll be back at 10 past 6. So, returning to the dilemma of the cannon, the player Wahizatul appeals to his clan chat to solve this moral dilemma. The scrying pool unanimously urge him to fire the cannon, proving that they are all monsters. Horrific monsters.
Yes.
The screen fades to black as the baby troll hurtles screaming into the void.
Best solution.
Major Ranker marches you all... I can't see the chat, I'm not sure, so maybe?
I don't think he is, but otherwise I would have loved to pour this, what the chat wants to do.
I'll poke him on
that's a shame then. Yeah, I want to pour this.
So,
carry on, Stu.
Major Ranker... Thank you. Major Ranker marches you all out of the Primer area, accompanied by a charming moment of humility from Ozan. The Major mentions that there's plenty of work still to do. Ozan, at the very mention of work, is conveniently reminded of urgent business in Draenor and takes his leave. It therefore falls to you to be a hero and help the people of Burthorpe. Rancor escorts you to the training area, where the Imperial Guard are unprepared for another assault. She urges you to head south and assist with the war effort. You nod gormlessly in consent. The primer completes with a congratulatory chapter complete pop-up. Note that it's been simplified since January. There's no longer question marks in the tracker with several choices of things to do. Instead, you're guided directly onto assisting Isolde in the next chapter. A breadcrumb trail leads the way to Isolde near the Burthorpe Forge. And it's only now that you're out of a confined area and free to explore the world that we introduce how to move. Instantly, we also can see that Captain Haskell's daily challenge stall has been added since January. This proved to be a very effective daily engagement metric, prompting a rework of the area in February 2014 to literally put daily challenges on a pedestal. Also, for those of you wondering the fate of the baby troll, you can claim it from Corporal Keemans over here, though it isn't on the critical path like before.
There's a RuneScape design principle worth highlighting there, I think, which is that you don't get punished for your decisions.
Yes, very true.
Which I think some players would prefer like a harsh choice and consequence system, but that's never really been part of RuneScape's. Like Partly because RuneScape's quite an invested game, right? Choice and Consequence is really good for games where you're playing them and then maybe replaying them. It takes 16 hours to complete or 20 hours to complete, and you play again. In a game like RuneScape, which could take tens of thousands of hours.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
The Telltale episodic series.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Telltale games take what?
Start them again.
Minutes?
You can start them again very, very easily. Try different alternatives, and there's no real long-term consequences. But with RuneScape, you create your account. You could have it for 10, 20 years, and if you make some kind of permanent change on that account that is going to impact you in the long term, you can't just easily rope another account and get to the same level of grinding that you've done. So having long-term consequences.
You shot a baby troll out of a cannon. You didn't realize that meant that you didn't get one of the coolest pets in the game. So in 20 hours time, when you suddenly realized that you can call your baby troll longsword or whatever, you might want it back, and so you can go and get it back.
Yeah, so the choices would have to be very, very clearly telegraphed, and in which case you're then making the choice for the long-term consequences, and you haven't to basically break the fourth wall to be told about those consequences.
Yeah. Would you like to role play and not have a pet? Just seems like a bad deal.
Yeah. So
mind you, maybe we should just punish you all for being monsters.
Yeah, I mean that's fair. I think entirely justified. Since some players were confused exactly how to change their baby troll's name, there are also now more detailed instructions, including how to feed him and how to get the pet to follow you. And that concludes the first chapter of the Troll Warzone tutorial. Stop them in their tracks. Are there any questions from the chat we'd like to do at this stage?
I had one from just before the break.
It's called Stop Them in Their Tracks because there's a mine and you go down the tracks to fight the trolls.
Right, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, it used the same one even after.
In the revised version, we didn't change the name of the chapter. Never even thought.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, there were a couple of things from just before we had the break that I had. So there was a message from Sammy who was asking why they only get RuneScape once, because despite there being 2 streams yesterday, we only streamed once yesterday. So you might have watched a hijacking stream or something like that. So definitely take a look at your account security there. Question from Inspector. What are our thoughts on being able to skip cutscenes in tutorials? Is that a good or a bad thing?
Oh, I talked about that a bit earlier. Oh, no, sorry. Did he say skip cutscenes specifically? I was talking about skipping tutorials.
Skipping cutscenes.
I mean, my feeling is that cutscenes need to be skippable. Like, I'm very much against unskippable cutscenes. Some of the worst gaming experiences of my life have been due to unskippable cutscenes. But it's slightly complicated with the tutorial. It kind of depends if there's important information. So, like, if you look at the Troll Warzone intro one, where Major Rancor's giving the speech, there's no gameplay information contained in that cutscene. It's just giving you an introduction. Like, basically, it's saying there's a village full of humans and trolls are attacking it. And that's the entire narrative content of that cutscene. It's just there's atmosphere and tone. And if you don't care about that, if that's not adding to your experience of the game, it doesn't make sense to force you to sit through that. Fundamentally, I think we should trust players to know what they care about. I don't agree that you should be allowed to skip fighting the troll boss, because that's teaching you important game interaction mechanics that you need to know to not get lost and annoyed with the game. But mandatory cutscenes, I think, are based on the idea that people should be forced to interact with the story, and that, if the only reason that players think they don't like lore is because they haven't been forced to interact with it more, which I think is just if you're a teenager to an adult playing a game, you know already whether you care about cutscenes. My early experience of that was I got my sister to play Max Payne, and Max Payne's a game I absolutely love. Which if you've seen my forum avatar that I use everywhere is actually Max Payne's face, if you don't know what that is. The one that's on my Twitter account and my Discord account. Yeah, that's Max Payne. I'm not Max Payne's not my favorite game of all time, but it's a game I really enjoyed. And I got my sister to play it, and I liked Max Payne for its atmospheric and evolving story. That was what was good about it, and the gameplay was good, but I enjoyed the story more. I got her to play with it. She just started skipping all the cutscenes. She enjoyed the gameplay, but she skipped the cutscenes. She didn't care. She just wasn't interested. It didn't add any enjoyment to her. And that was baffling and inscrutable to me. And when I got my head around that, it helped me to understand why, some players spacebar through quests, and that isn't bad for them, because if that's the way they want to enjoy the content, they know that better than I do. You know, it's not my place to force them to enjoy the content in the way I would enjoy it. So yes,
It's
skip
kind of like
it.
giving them an option.
Thumbs up from me. Unless it contains information that the player absolutely needs, which is rarely the case, because it's usually a lore thing, you know.
Yeah, the approach that I take and that we sometimes take is to make these cutscenes replayable. If that way, if nothing else, a lot of work usually goes into them. These ones here, they've had a lot of bespoke animations and so forth to maximize the value of that. Whether it's because you skipped it or just because you'd like to rewatch it. So, for example, the cutscenes from the first world event, you know, you can replay them even if you didn't necessarily attend it the first time around. It just gets a bit more value out of that. I think that helps to balance out them being skippable.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense, particularly thinking about the previous point about choice, right? That like skipping cutscene is a choice, and you shouldn't be punished for your choices. If you do, if your friend is like, "Did you watch that cutscene? It was really cool. I know you hate all cutscenes, but this is the coolest one ever, and you'll love it." And you're like, "No, I skipped it." Then, yeah, I mean, with YouTube now, like you can probably go watch it on YouTube, so it's not that big a deal technically. But
yeah, no, I really like what you said there about it kind of be like an option, like it's there for if you want to, but if you're not interested in, you can skip it. Like if it's not something that appeals to you, I think is really good. That it's kind of, you can make it the experience you want to be, and that comparison to like spacebarring through quest chat or chat in general, I think is also very valid, and I had not thought of that comparison. So thank you for that one. September raffle, there won't be one this year. Was another question. This is a difficult one, so I don't know if we will have an answer to this one. But the Morningstar's Examine is a huge and powerful troll named for its first meal. Do we know what its first meal was?
Well,
it was
Morningstar.
Satan. It's Satan.
Oh, I see. He ate Lucifer. Right.
No, it was a Morningstar.
Right.
He ate a spiked mace, is what he ate.
Okay.
Which is sometimes called a Morningstar. But it is cool, man.
Which is interesting because I don't think we actually have Morningstars in RuneScape.
No,
at least not as a standard weapon class.
I think Bob from Bob's Axes invented the Morningstar, and then before he could show it to anyone, Morningstar ate it. There you go. I've made that.
Good work there.
That's canon now.
Law on the fly. I like it.
I don't think Morningstar is actually. It's one of those things that got popularized by D&D and early like fantasy stuff. I don't think Morningstars are actually a historical weapon. I think it's it's like an apocryphal thing that was then made a big deal of by early fantasy writers. So I think because the spiked maces exist, that's a thing that exists, but I don't think they're called Morningstars in real life. It's just a cool word. Sounds good.
You got anything else for us, Poerkie?
That's it.
Okay.
I mean, there's just one. No, there's actually just one that came into the Twitch chat as well. What was the concept of the Dwarven Army X being given to you during the Troll Warzone? Is there a reason for that?
Sorry, could you say that again?
Is there a reason, or what was the concept behind giving you the Dwarven Army Axe during Troll Warzone?
Oh, we talked a bit about that in the previous stream. It was kind of left over. It was supposed to be something that you got given when you became a member. So when it was first implemented, it was my project. And when you became a member for the first time, you just got given the Army Axe as like a special. Yeah, I was talking earlier about it's difficult to communicate the value of membership. So this is one of those, like, it gives you something straight away so that membership has value immediately rather than only later. And that was an early version of that. And then when everyone got a free membership trial, it didn't make any sense to just dump an Army Axe into your inventory. So we just integrated it into the Troll Warzone, and I think we gradually de-emphasized it. It was given as a reward, and I think we de-emphasized it so it wasn't automatically given as a reward. You had to kind of explore and find it. But yeah, it was vestigial content, and we didn't want to hide it from you. You know, it's not like you're not allowed to have it, but at the same time, we didn't want to push it in your face, so we just kind of moved it around a little bit.
All right, thank you. I like the response of Super Soko being like, leftover content. That's something we often do. But...
yeah, it's very rare that we design content for a very specific purpose, which no longer exists. Like most of our content isn't added for a particularly specific purpose. Or like it's to fill a level band or something, right? Like that's the typical need. We're like, we need some 40 to 70 rune crafting content or something. And that very rarely becomes redundant.
Yeah. I
Inspector
see you
asked,
comment in chat. Oh yeah, go for it.
Inspector asked, who decided on the funny names and examines. I suspect it was probably Mod Lion-O and or Mod Maltaire. I think the names were almost all Lion-O, and the examines were almost all Maltaire, I'd expect. I don't know that for sure, though.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Maltaire was involved in the names of the tasks, because there's definitely a lot of punnery.
Oh, yeah,
it seems.
Yeah, that's
in keeping with him.
Yeah, he's the task guy, yeah. And the task name guy.
All right, cool.
Ready? Shall we move on to the next chapter?
Whenever you're ready. Yes.
Yeah. So, you're first directed to an angry recruit named Isolde near Burthorpe's Forge via breadcrumb trail in Hintera. Incidentally, is that name because he is old, or was there meant to be some kind of pun there? Was it?
I don't know, actually. He was called that before I arrived on the project, I think. Because Isolde is a Shakespearean female name, isn't it? Isolde?
I don't know.
Isn't that a female character from Shakespeare? But yeah, he's a...
Someone in chat should know.
Yeah, I'm sure you will.
I remember him having...
as we speak.
There was like a whole backstory, because Jose, who worked on the project with us, was Portuguese, and I'm sure there was some Portuguese cultural relation between Isolde, because isn't his wife dead or something? Yeah, they killed his wife. And him and his wife had... I'm sure there was some Portuguese thing. Isolde is how I say it. I don't know if that's true.
Okay, so Mod Z was involved in the project before you joined?
I think so. I think he was on the original team. Yeah, when I joined it, Burthorpe they'd remapped Burthorpe and they'd started to create the NPCs, but they hadn't really designed anything.
Gotcha. Okay, so he also emotes about avenging his wife's dead soul, as you pointed out, presumably to help draw attention to him. Peculiarly, all the better quality videos I could find didn't have the chapter tracker interface in the corner of the screen, even those in windowed mode. Perhaps that was A/B tested, but also it looks like the player had the option to close the tracker panel in some later versions. So I've pasted the activity tracker from other videos wherever I could find one into the top left corner, therefore there's a lot of different variations. You're welcome. Isolde concisely conveys that trolls killed his wife, and therefore his desire to kill them all. In order to learn 2 artisan skills, Isolde wants you to smith him a bronze helm and craft him leather gloves. I'm guessing this ties back to something that you mentioned previously about, rather than focusing on one particular skill, try to teach skills as a concept. So we're doing 2 artisan skills at the same time.
Yes.
To get the general notion of you take resources, convert them to something.
Yeah, I mean, in this, I think the opinion I gave was like, I don't think that we should teach every skill, but we very much are teaching every skill here. So yeah,
right.
We're just sort of compacting them down. But yeah, I mean, the idea here is you can make your own weapons, you can make your own armor, right? And it makes sense to introduce. It makes sense to cover. Obviously we could do that entirely within blacksmithing, smithing. But it makes sense to cover 2 skills since we're trying to cover all the skills.
Right.
I think
unfortunately,
if I was designing it without every skill, I probably would use smithing for both, because I think introducing one skill and showing that skill can do 2 different things is probably useful.
Would you introduce other forms of make-X and banking beforehand, though? Because you have the aspect of the metal bank. So essentially, you've got the notion of having to deposit items into this inventory first, and a bit like the simpler make-X.
The thing about the metal bank is it makes you more efficient, but you don't need it. Like you can go and mine up some copper and some tin, smelt it, and smith with it without needing to understand how the metal bank works. If you see what I mean.
Right. So would you ideally hide the metal bank?
I probably wouldn't tutorial the metal bank at this stage. Because it's not necessary to understand how the core interactions of RuneScape work. It's more of a perk.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
So would you hide the metal bank from the smithing interface?
Sorry, Luke, what was your question?
I would feel very bad finding out about that later, though, because it's like so much quality of life that's like almost integral to the skill, I would say.
It's always with tutorial design. It's always just a really delicate balance, because you can overwhelm with information. Like I've expressed in the past that I see our responsibility as teaching interactions, right? You need to know how to engage with the game. Our responsibility isn't and shouldn't be to teach how to optimize, like how to play correctly. We teach you how to play the game, how to interact with the game, but we don't say something like, this is the correct content to do. This is the correct, like a new player will very frequently post on Reddit and say something like, hey, I'm new to the game. What should I go and do? And someone will say, okay, you need to get to Priff. Here's the list of things you need to do in order to get into Priff. Like, so you should focus on this. This is your objective. Here's your list. We shouldn't be doing that for the player, right? Like that level of sort of like, here's how to play efficiently, I think is something that should be either discovered or taught through interaction. Because if we try to do it, like honestly, it'll likely end up outdated, right? Like, because what's optimal changes constantly. I would argue in a sort of ideological sense, kind of isn't up to us to determine. Like we produce the best content that we can, but it's ultimately up to the community to decide what content is and isn't worth doing, what content isn't worth prioritizing. So I don't think the game should try to teach that.
Fair.
So how do you feel about I've forgotten what I was going to ask now, but so how do you feel about the notion of paths that then after the tutorial help give the player additional goals and guide them towards that other content? So like we've taught the core loop of mining in a simple way in the tutorial, but say paths that help you with mining your first ore box and knowing that ore boxes are a thing, a path about the notion of the metal bank. So kind of take those individual components and teach them separately and something that the player can opt into. Would you find that useful?
Absolutely. That's the compromise of the more content you introduce. Like every concept you teach the player increases the chance of them just disengaging or stop paying attention, especially if it's mandatory. So an optional side path. Are you really enjoying smithing and mining? Okay, great. Here's a mining and smithing tutorial you can go off that teaches you about the ore box, that teaches you about the metal bank. Brilliant. But putting that on the map. I think you can see. We've removed the Troll Warzone now, right? And I think a big part of the problem with the Troll Warzone is this exact issue, that it tried to teach you. How many skills was it at the time? 25, however many it was.
Something like that.
It tried to teach you all of those skills, and it made you do all of them before you were allowed to leave. And I think that was not a good approach. And so, if what you're saying is let's allow them to go somewhere else and do something else, brilliant. Like give you a taster, right, and then allow you to focus on the thing that you want to focus on. I think makes a lot of sense as an approach.
Right, but we need to be very careful of what we make mandatory. Keep the bare minimum of that, and so that the player who wants to engage with those deeper mechanics can do and has direction to do so. But don't force it on them, because otherwise they might not be interested, and they're just hammering their way through this tutorial trying to get it done as quickly as possible.
Yeah, exactly. The player's attention span. The player's attention span is a precious resource that we can't abuse. I think fundamentally. Yeah. We can't just assume that they'll pay attention for as long as we want them to, because they won't.
So was equipping Isolde originally an act of heroism, or was the scene added when it became necessary to tutorialize the free-to-play skills as well as the member skills in Troll Warzone?
It was an act of heroism, although it was a very functional one. So in the very early version of this wasn't mandatory. It was just something you could stumble across. And then he was like, make me a sword, and so you made him a sword. And then he charged off. Okay, so it was just I think.
Okay, so it was making a sword at the time, just
I think so.
one smithing item.
May have been a sword and a helmet. I can't remember.
But it was smithing focused rather than including crafting.
I believe so.
Okay, cool. So it's a linear tutorial. So your next task in completing those objectives is to mine copper ore to smith. You're directed into the Burthorpe mine, conveniently located near the smithing area. A video from January 2012 first had you get a bronze pickaxe from the mining tutor's shop and add it to your tool belt. I guess tools were added automatically to your tool belt later in that year, because this was removed in other versions. Tool belting the pickaxe then triggered a cry for help from the mine. You then switched to a slightly more heroic objective of rescuing the miners to take you into the cave.
Oh, here comes my favorite NPC.
Yeah, indeed. Switching back to the original version, though, you're instructed to mine copper ore. Since it's the old mining system, the ore rocks could deplete, and therefore multiple rocks are marked. Once you've mined one copper ore, Linza cries out for help, guiding you to a cave-in at the rear of the mine. You are by no means required to follow that guidance, however. We can see this industrious player chose to focus on their gains, continuing to mine tin and earn level 2 mining, complete several other achievements, before they deigned to respond to the damsel in distress. Interacting with the blocked tunnel triggers this conversation with Lindsay. She and 2 miners are trapped behind the cave-in, and she needs someone to heroically clear the debris. Your act of heroism is expressed in this nicely animated cutscene. RuneScape doesn't have a physics system, so I imagine animating that collapsing rubble and dust couldn't have been easy. You peck away at the collapsed rocks and free the miners just before the tunnel collapses. Lindsay and one of the miners express their gratitude. The miner from Durham manages to suppress their political opinions.
Thank you, he says, I think. Is that right? I think that's his delivery.
That's right,
Thank
that's
you.
it.
That's emblazoned into my mind.
Yes. In thanks for your act of heroism, Lindsay gives you your Dwarven Army Axe. It'll gradually upgrade as you continue through the tutorial, starting with an XP bonus when mining copper and tin ore. Once you have both types of ore... Yeah?
Do you happen to know, Stu, whether it... I can't remember this. Did it only work as copper until you leveled up to 10, or was it a steel? Did it work like a steel tool right from the outset as soon as you were given it?
As far as
I can't remember.
Yeah, I think it was iron level. I think it stayed that way. I think it was static. I don't believe it leveled up with you. Or if it did, it was in a very early version that I've not encountered.
When it was first designed, it worked for steel, and I think in retrospect, I don't think giving the player. I think we must have nerfed it to iron for that problem. But yeah, it messed with the core progression, right? Like the early RuneScape has quite a precious progression of like before it becomes the mid-level to high-level slog. Like I leveled up, I quickly leveled up. I got a new tool. I unlocked the ability to use a tool. I can just conveniently make that tool myself. I don't have to go grind Chaos Dwarfs for it. So like, and actually the Dwarven Army Axe interfered with that core progression because you didn't just go copper to iron, iron to steel. Instead, you had this strange other tool. So yeah, in retrospect, yeah, I don't think we should have given out the Dwarven Army Axe in the way that we did. I think we should have hidden it
because the early progression is so rapid that you kind of lose out on the notion of having this aspiration of the next level and that being easily accessible to you.
Yeah. Instead, you've just been given something which is. I mean, I think we did nerf it, but originally it was level 20. So that's just cut out a huge amount of progression, which is a real shame.
So once you have both types of ore, your next objective is to smelt a bronze bar. So you're directed to the furnace outside, and a flashing button highlight is used to indicate what you need to press in the MakeX interface. Once you've smelted the bar, you're briefly told that skilling gives you experience, and the purpose of the metal bar you just created. Now you need to smith a bronze helm for Isolde. Again, highlights are used to indicate the specific buttons you should press to guide you through the MakeX interface. Smithing the helm then tells you why armor is useful, and why leveling your smithing skill is useful. Isolde also needs leather gloves, so your next objective is to perform a hallmark act of RuneScape heroism, slaughtering livestock.
I've got a story about this.
I ran out of... Oh yeah, please do.
I was testing this. So cows got nerfed, and the reason cows got nerfed is because I was getting my wife to play through this tutorial that we'd done, and the cow killed her, and she rage quit so hard she just closed the lid of the laptop and walked out of the room because the cow had killed her. That was how angry.
How recent is this?
This is while we were developing this. So this was like 8 years ago. Yeah,
so
that's why we nerfed cows. Because I was like,
that is fascinating.
If this is my wife's experience, then this must be a lot of people who are just dying to cows. And
I mean, I feel like there must be people that still experience that when they fight goblins now.
Yeah, well, the goblins aren't as dangerous, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I mean, other than the trolls, cows tend to be the meta for early game combat. So yeah, thanks. Your wife single-handedly established the combat training method for new players.
No, they were already meta before that. I think that was like they just
But even
they
easier.
just do less damage now because you could just safe spot them anyway. Like you could just sit and safe spot them. It's just that we don't really teach.
Yeah, it's very difficult to die to a cow even as a brand new player. Yeah, that explains it.
Yeah. Nowadays it's possible. Yeah, or almost.
Are there any other questions from the chat, by the way? We move on.
Someone asked. Sorry, go ahead, Luke.
Well, I was gonna. The Wildcard 53 has done a fact check for us regarding the Morning Stars. Balls and chains flails existed, and they were sometimes erroneously called Morning Stars, and then Morning Stars referred to rigid spiked maces. So they kind of did exist. And then I had a question.
I'm not sure they were called that at the time. It's a detail I've
Yeah, I mean it might have been changed over time. That's the information I've been given, and I'd like to trust the Wildcard 53 with access to Google and everything else in between. And Sir Theodore Castle also asked the question: has it been made on purpose that Izoid's Surcode is brown to stand out, or was it just by coincidence?
Well, that's a good question. I think the NPC's word is that each of those NPCs, or most of them, were given like a unique appearance. Well, aren't they the character creation NPCs? Is that right? The skilling tutors all dressed as the character creation.
The tutors certainly are, from the previous character creation, and they use the same grandiose animations there. In Isolde's case, I think because he's using a kind of a more generic appearance, he seems to be using more like shaking his fist at the trolls and doing overhead NPC says and so forth to try and draw attention to him.
I imagine, I don't know for sure, but I imagine that was on purpose. It would surprise me if it wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they may have put more grass around him to make the contrast or something like that.
Esto Aitsu asked, have we heard about the mining and smithing rework? Well, I haven't. That sounds pretty cool. That sounds really awesome. You should probably play that content. That sounds really cool.
Yeah, give it a shot.
Yeah.
Stole my thunder there, Jack.
Let's all go and make those iron pickaxes that I was saying were such great content. And someone asked, was the tutorial for the Troll Warzone so bad that we also had to introduce the Combat Academy? Which I thought was a slightly aggressively phrased but perfectly reasonable question. My memory is that the Combat Academy was added with EOC, but the Combat Academy didn't. So I think it predates this new version of the rainy Morningstar fight. I think the Combat Academy came out before that, because I'm pretty sure the Combat Academy came out with EOC, and then this was added later, I think.
I think this may have come out with Evolution of Combat, because it kind of needed the combat mechanics in order to function and teach you abilities and so forth. I think it came out in November along with the rest.
Right, so they came out at the same time. So the Combat Academy was very much aimed at existing players. That was its target audience. Go to Lumbridge, learn how EOC works. Whereas this is much more aimed at a brand new player. This is your first ever thing. So they weren't really trying to accomplish. They didn't really have similar goals. This was just like this tutorial is just teaching you the basics of how to click on stuff and what an ability even is.
And that's partly why the Combat Academy wound up being removed, because a lot of the lessons that were there were built for the very first version of the combat system to try and acclimate you to using very manual ability usage, all the things we've automated now with Revolution. So most of his lessons you don't need to know those things, because the game pretty much just plays itself. And then there were other aspects that didn't work as well on different platforms. So there just wasn't much we could actually carry across. But yeah, I definitely would like to do another combat tutorial that's replayable, even if it's only take the parts from the path and make them replayable. Anyway, any more questions?
Not that I've
Those
noticed
were all
so
the ones
far.
I had written down.
Okay, good. So I ran out of 2012 footage at this point, so we'll switch to an October 2013 video. As you can see, we've made the leap to the new interface system. The full power of interface customization is now at your disposal. So our erstwhile player has chosen to use their power to put all their interfaces on the right-hand side of the screen. No judgment. They kill a cow and pick up some cowhide for the safety it provides. You are directed to the tanner and guided through paying to tan your hide into leather, though the on-screen task panel seems to have been lost in the migration to the new interface system. The leather in your backpack then gets the animated highlights to indicate your next action. Unfortunately, this illustrates the drawback of allowing the player freedom to change their layout. Despite the animated glow, it can be easily missed in all the other interface noise. We followed a similar highlighting approach in the Burthorpe paths, but found that even with the activity tracker on screen to tell you what to do, and the highlight to tell you where to do it, players still tend to struggle to notice the object glow. A retro point I'd raise from this is that we should probably attach a more egregious pop-up, even if it duplicates the description of the required action, whenever highlighting an inventory object to draw the player's eye towards it. Though that creates its own challenges, since the player could reposition the interface to any corner of the screen, so the pop-up would need to line up accordingly. An alternative is to darken the rest of the screen to draw more attention to it, though that can be ineffective, especially if the player is playing on a high-resolution monitor. I recall that approach of darkening the screen was used a lot for Godric's paths after Ashdale, and focus testers tended to squint through the darkened screen and carry on playing regardless. They assumed it was some kind of day-night cycle or weather effect. Now that the players figured out they need to click the glowy thing, they're guided step by step through the interfaces that require you to choose a tool, which item to craft, and press the leatherwork button. Now we can deliver the bronze helm and leather gloves to Isolde, so he can join the militia. A short, static cutscene ensues, where you give Isolde your newly crafted equipment, and he arms himself. He asks you to hit him, and you gladly comply. As a reward, Isolde gives you his Imperial Chisel, and even he doesn't know why it was given to him. This is another upgrade to your Dwarven Army Axe, themed to the crafting skill. And if you're free to play, one hand giveth and one hand taketh away. You also receive a mining XP lamp for completing this chapter. It's the only chapter that awards a lamp, so I assume it's intended to teach you that you can rub lamps to get experience?
I think so, yeah. Yeah. I think we didn't want to overwhelm with loads of them.
We've now completed the second chapter of the Troll Warzone tutorial, covering mining, smithing, and crafting. Any questions?
No new questions, but I've been requested, and just giving you a heads up, Stu, I've been given the instructions to tie you to the chair until you are going to read The Betrayal at Faladar as an audible book. So once lockdown ends, stay away from me, I would say.
All right.
Because
wow,
I
I thought
do
this series was niche. But, yeah, happy to do that.
Is that our next live stream series? Just Stu reads Betrayal at Faladar.
Well, we're going to run out of tutorials eventually.
Maybe Stu
maybe in
reads
about 2 years.
I mean, we've already after we've had other tutorials, we could always continue quests. So
you could do the shipping report.
Yeah. If the players want it.
You can just read the logs. Yeah.
Anything with the players. Someone asked, what's the secret of being a successful JMod? I'm not sure how we classify successful, but I think making at least 3 tutorials, probably. As long as you've made at least 3 tutorials, you're a successful JMod.
Have you worked on 3 tutorials, Spotjack?
Ooh, no, I think I've only worked on 2, so I'm not successful.
Well, I'll never be successful, I guess. This is a bit more fun for me.
Yeah, it's a very narrow definition that I'm working with here. But yeah, I'm afraid I don't make the rules. None of us are successful. I think Stu might have worked on 3. Have you worked on 3? Or have you only worked on 2?
I believe I might qualify, depending on your definitions.
Whoa. I think Stu might be the only successful JMod.
It depends on whether you count the post-tutorial content, because I worked on Ashdale, Godric's Paths.
Yeah, that counts.
Burthorpe Paths.
We'll vouch for you.
Bringing Tutorial Island back. And then technically there was my Game Jam project where I brought back the Lumbridge Paths as the new path system before it became the Burthorpe Paths.
In which case I qualify as well, because I've definitely worked on multiple versions of recommendation systems. Yeah, it's fine. Yeah, me and Stu, the only successful JMods.
There we go.
Well, c'est la vie, my friends. Au revoir.
Yeah. Good work, everybody. Ready to move on?
Yep.
Yeah, we can do one more chapter.
Okay, then we've got time for just one more chapter if we don't do too many questions. And so we begin Chapter 3, Hell's Kitchen. The breadcrumb trail guides you a fair way south to Sister Judith near the Tavley house portal. She reports that the war in Burthorpe is affecting all of their citizens. As the death toll rises, refugees have fled south to comparable safety, but supplies are scarce and the refugees are starving. Sister Judith does not have your skill in cooking, hunter, and farming, and most adventurers are too busy with their own gains to aid the needy. She enlists you to bring her 4 cooked food. You can speak to the refugees clustered around the nearby campfire, but they're all too hungry to speak. Theoretically, yeah, they each of them had their own dialogue for exactly that same line. So if you go to talk to them along the line, it seems like there's some kind of cult. Theoretically, this is a more free-form objective, but you're given explicit direction toward the nearby cage fishing spot until you've fished 4 crayfish. Then the breadcrumb trail directs you back to the nearby campfire to use your cooking skill. This mechanics occurrence doesn't have highlighting, which apparently I must be on the wrong page for because it does. Since you're free to cook different food if you wish. Maybe I'll put in a different slide there. You're directed to Sister Judith to give her the food, but using food on the refugees provides this bespoke interface that finds food in your backpack to donate to them. I assume the intention was to teach the use object on entity mechanic on the critical path. Sister Judith admires your luxurious choice of cuisine. She has different responses depending on the type of food you feed the refugees. Once you've fed the refugees the requisite number of items, a cutscene ensues. Sister Judith expresses her gratitude for your assistance. You then receive an upgrade to your Dwarven Army Axe, bestowing bonus cooking XP when using the hunter sites in Taverthorpe. And a reassurance that the Dwarven Army Axe is an exclusive benefit of your membership. And that concludes the fishing and cooking chapter. Let me see when the
you can see there where we've tried to integrate the army axe a little bit better in, rather than just being an item that we just dump on you. I'm pretty sure that was later. I don't think that was there on the original launch of Troll Warzone.
Yeah, this was quite a bit later.
The axe over time. I don't think that was in it originally, and I think we added that to try rather than just giving you this best in slot item, instead it became a reward space that could be gradually upgraded over time and something. I'm not 100% convinced it works, to be honest. I don't think it's great, but I think that's what we were trying to accomplish was a consistent item that you could understand and be upgraded.
Yeah, I think it might work better if you were given more agency to go and use the skill you just learned about, because that way you have this upgrade that you can benefit from and feel like you can apply it. Maybe. Yeah.
Maybe the option to like grind out that upgrade or something. Well done for completing the chapter. Now you have the opportunity to grind a new upgrade.
Just wanted to check as well. So in Tutorial Island, you will burn your first shrimp. It will always burn. Do we have something similar in Troll Warzone, or did we purposely not make you burn the crayfish?
I think your first one never burns. I may be misremembering, but I'm pretty sure I don't know if that's still true, but for Troll Warzone, I think the first crayfish you cook doesn't burn.
The first 4 of them, I imagine.
Yeah, there's a lot of...
I think it's just the first one. But we went back and forth on that so much. I have horrible memories of watching like 8-year-old children in playtesting sessions burning shrimp and not understanding what was going on. Because the problem with it, like when you're designing it as a tutorial, it's like, okay, go and get the crayfish. Now come back. Now try to cook them. Oh, you don't have enough. Like you fished up 4, you cooked 3 of them. 1 of them burned. Now you need to go fish again. Oh my god!
Or your campfires despawned, so you have to.
From a tutorial perspective, that whole mechanic is just a nightmare of like trying to teach you how to deal with it. So yeah, you might be right that your first 4 don't burn. I can't remember.
Yeah, there are quite a few tools like that we inherited. The Burthorpe pods also, like your first fires are guaranteed to light. Your first tree is guaranteed to cut, because these things are based on random chance. It doesn't give the player any feedback as to whether it's going to succeed or not, or what they're doing wrong. So that prompts them to just keep spam clicking, hoping that, oh, maybe I just need to interact with the thing more, it'll make it happen.
It's interesting because even right now, so we've got the existing tutorial island right now. I know that like a couple of weeks we had a pretty long conversation about whether if we were to make changes to the tutorial island, like should the first shrimp that you could still burn or not, and like it's like almost like a 50% split as well, because there are also a lot of people saying like this is iconic to RuneScape, so don't change it. And you've got those who's like, well, it's a
really
bit of a cheating experience, right? Yeah, it's a really complicated one, but I just love how such a small element of the tutorial, which like just lasts like a tick or two at most, can just spark so much conversation and discussion. I just find that fascinating.
Yeah, it's these little weird little things come up in the tutorial system. Yeah, trying to teach failure or trying to teach recovery from failure is actually a really difficult problem.
That's very true. Let's move on a slide, because if nothing else, the blurriness of this one is making me upset. It was the best that I could find for that particular one, because it seemed like there must have been a bug in that step just after due to this cutscene, because almost every video I found didn't show up this chapter prompt imagery. So that was the best version I could find of it. Any more questions?
I think I've not seen any. Did you see any more, Jack?
No, there's been some discussion about other stuff, but not really relevant to the tutorial.
Well, there was one thing that I wanted to say. Where is the effing lamb sauce or whatever that? I don't know why we started talking about
lamb sauce.
Gordon Ramsay.
Oh, what? Yes. So I'll do this chapter because he does feature briefly.
Yeah, Gordon Ramsay's in here. Yeah, indeed. Well, he's not really Gordon Ramsay anymore.
Yeah, there's a slight variation. Yeah. So after the fishing and cooking chapter. Go ahead.
This version, the earlier versions very specifically tried to not force you onto the next chapter. By this point, the version you're going through here, you can see that they are forcing you onto the next chapter quickly. Yeah. The idea was supposed to be, like what I was saying earlier about like having a taster, that you could do a bit of mining and smithing. And if you're like, oh, I'd quite like to make a full set of bronze armor for myself, you could just hang around and do that. And then you had to click a button to say, please take me on to the next part of the tutorial. And we had so much drop out there where people were just sort of wandering around aimlessly, not finding the button on their user interface. So this version of it was much more linear and much more mandatory, which is a shame.
Do you think that can be solved by making that selection interface more prominent and still giving the player that freedom of choice?
I think it's a UI problem. Yeah, at the time we were quite restricted in what we could and couldn't do. UI-wise, I think we've got a lot more. We've got a lot more, technical ability to communicate better now than we did at the time. Like I would say something like, "Can I have a button that appears in the middle of the screen and then flies over with a shower of sparkles to show you where it is?" Like really basic tutorials. And they're like, "No, I can't do that. That's like 3 weeks of work to do that if you want that."
Yeah, and that was back when they had a static interface. Now we have one where you can put your interfaces anywhere on the screen. Yeah. You have a mobile version where your finger takes up a quarter of the screen, so things have to have very big buttons. We have a lot more constraints to deal with. But that would be the ideal, wouldn't it? To be able to draw the player's eye towards things in their peripheral vision. So you're then guided south to the Thieving Tutor in the Pick and Loot Tavern to start the 4th chapter, The War Profiteers. After a few acts of altruistic heroism, events become a little more iniquitous. In earlier versions, Ruth first instructs you to pickpocket a nearby pompous merchant. Since you do so again during the Let the Meat Pie quest, this step was later removed. Some iterations also had this step, which guided you through selling an item in your backpack to the cooking tutor, Mess Sergeant Ramsay. That's where our lamb sauce man turns up. And he, like everyone else, has voiced chat on the subject. He actually has a surprising amount of opening dialogue variants. So I think he has like twice or 3 times as many as any other tutor. I guess someone liked writing for this character.
Oh, that was me. Yeah, I wrote all this.
There we go.
Have you got any of them?
I don't.
Everything he says, assuming I'm remembering the character correctly, is it's like a thing that people say when they're parodying French,
right?
In English.
Okay.
Like "Où est la pamplemousse," right? That's like if you were just trying to sound like you knew how to speak French but didn't actually know how to speak French, you would say "Où est la pamplemousse? Où est la discothèque?" Right? And that's like all his dialogue is just that. but in English.
Right. Well, I'm glad you found something to be inspired by.
Yeah.
I imagine a lot of the dialogue writing around here was quite workhorseman-like.
Yeah, very much, yeah.
So all the tutors in the Troll Warzone are general stores, allowing you to sell any item instead of only the specific items they have in stock. So in this step, the player is asked to sell an item, and they can choose any item and sell it on. Only some versions seem to have this one, though. So you're next directed to Nails Newton to start the first of 3 quests on the critical path of the Troll Warzone tutorial. Nails makes a valiant effort to connect this quest to the Warzone story. I imagine this was one of the many rewrites that Mod Wilson had to do for this quest, and present an altruistic front for your impending nefarious deeds. A notable thing about Let Them Eat Pie is that, as the first quest on the tutorial, it had guidance breadcrumbs at every step all the way through it. You can see here that even when you had multiple objectives, there were arrows at your feet pointing to each of those objectives to the blue box highlighting on your map, as well as flashing arrows on the map to guide you to the blue boxes. Since this is a very long tutorial and the quests are still in-game for you to play, I'm going to skip the quests to hopefully keep the stream to 2 hours, and we might just barely make it. But rest assured, during Let Them Eat Pie, you did some horrible things and made inventive use of your cooking, fishing, hunter, and thieving skills. Which concludes the 4th chapter of the Troll Warzone. And I think we will leave it there unless there are any other questions in the chat. We can go all the way down to the Stu and the last slide.
Did you see any more, Jack?
No, not any new ones.
Cool.
Okay then.
All right.
I talked a bit
it
about the development of Let Them Eat Pie in the previous stream, I think. It was, as you said, like he just had to rewrite it again, and we've never made a quest that's been rewritten as often as that quest. It was just completely demoralizing for him. He absolutely hated it.
What's the reason we have rewritten it so many times?
Well, it started out as just a quest, and then it was rewritten to be a tutorial, and then because it was the tutorial, it was subject to the same feedback process that the rest of the Troll Warzone was. So constant playthroughs and constant feedback again and again and again and again and again. And we, normally a quest will, you'll implement the quest. There'll be a rough version of it. We'll give feedback on that. Then there's a finished version of it. If we have time, we'll give feedback on that. And that, 2 rounds of feedback max, usually 1. This one must have had 10 something rounds of feedback. It was a nightmare for the developer. I mean, it's fine for me because I was just like, fix this. But it was awful for him.
Yeah, I think it just ties back to, because this project was originally done, as I mentioned on the beginning, under very, very different goals, and then all that content needed to be repurposed towards very different goals, and those goals themselves would shift over time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so the quest had to be rewritten to fit the new goals, which is just horrible as a developer to have to do that. But it existed for that purpose.
Cool. Okay. I mean, you did the opening, Stu. Would you like to do the ending, or would you like me to do that?
I think since you didn't get to join us for the beginning, if you wouldn't mind taking the ending.
If I wouldn't mind. All right. Well, thank you all for watching. Thank you, Stu, for joining. Rightfully so. Lean back and sit back and enjoy, Jack. Thank you for joining as well. Aside from the troubles, I hope it was an enjoyable stream. Thank you for the questions. We hope to see you next month again. Next week we're going to have him, and you will find out more what that means on this beautiful Wednesday. So definitely look at that. With phrases ready, I know you've got one, Stu. I don't know if you prepared a catchphrase this time, Jack.
I've got one from the chat.
Oh, excellent!
Cool, all right.
Perfect way to close out the stream. OMG,
exactly.
Stu is so cute.
Oh, what a great catchphrase! All right, we'll leave it at that.
It's really
Look
sweet.
after yourselves. Tot ziens.
Good night, everybody.
See you next time.
Ah.